Today I have with me Kelsey Dower, who is a rising symphonic metal vocalist, composer, and multi-instrumentalist whose work bridges classical orchestration, metal, anime soundtracks, and cinematic world building. Her solo releases, including Boundless, Mafa, and her anime cover album, showcase a self-produced sound rooted in precision, ambition, and pretty expansive scale. She's also a featured vocalist and co-writer on Bjorn Hofer's In the Shadow trilogy on B-Track Records, and has contributed to film-inspired and orchestral projects across North America. In this episode, we're going to chat about the creative process and maybe some other stuff too. Thank you, Kelsey, so much for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. So I wanted to ask right off the bat, when you first started shaping your sound, what felt like the moment that you realized this is what I'm supposed to make? Was it a particular song or a moment that you can recall, or has that just always been with you?
It's pretty much always been with me, just in regards to making music in general. I was maybe about 18 months old, maybe 1.5, when I just would have heard something on the TV and played it exactly as I heard it. Now, I'm 18 months old. To me, I'm just playing. It's as normal as, I don't know, playing with blocks or something. But, my mom, she notices it and gets me involved in other performances. Like when I was 10, I opened for Clay Aiken. And when I was 12 and going, I would do things like perform in Lincoln Hall Center and Carnegie Hall. I think I might have said Lincoln Center wrong. Anyway, then I got into my sophomore year. That's when I was more introduced to metal overall. And, at first I'm kind of like, oh, I probably shouldn't like this, but I really do. Then, as time went on, I went through various genres of metal, seeing which one really clicked with me as a musician. And it turned out to be symphonic metal. I mean, don't get me wrong. I like alt metal and gothic metal like Evanescence. But when I heard Within Temptation, that was that is the metal genre that I want to do.
Right. So when were you first introduced to, just in general, when do you recall how old you were?
I was maybe about 15 or 16. It was just
And what was that moment for you?
It was just kind of a, how do I say, maybe a bit of a culture shock, so to speak. I don't know if that's the correct term for it, but, before that time, I've never really listened to metal or was never really purposefully introduced to it, so to speak. I grew up around other genres of music, but, yeah, as soon as I just would hear it in the background, it was in my PE class back in 10th grade because they would allow to play music there, and it was always rock and metal. And to me, I'm like, all right. But then the more it kept playing, I'm like, okay, because it affected me in ways that other genres of music just don't.
Can you
So,
explain? Can you elaborate on that?
well, I would hear other genres of music and I would appreciate the artistry behind it. And I would understand the story and the intent that the artist would do, but it wouldn't really touch me in a way that was speaking to my heart, my mind, all at the same time, or my experiences, or it wasn't really fully inspirational to me. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I kind of do actually.
But with metal, I got to be happy or sad or angry or confused or just everything all at once.
It's almost like a permission slip for your own emotions. It's
Yeah.
cathartic, really.
Yes. Yes.
I love that. Yeah, I think, and particularly symphonic metal, it's interesting because you have such a strong instrumental orchestral background. And that's what I kind of want to tease out a little bit more in a minute. But I think what's really interesting about symphonic metal is it requires both technical precision and this emotional scale, this almost widescreen type of momentousness to everything. And that's, I guess, am I right in thinking that those two sides first clicked together for you was with symphonic metal in particular?
Yeah. Yeah. Because, growing up, I'm more on the creative side, and it wouldn't be until I got into community college or university that I'm hey, I'm getting the more technical aspects behind being able to compose stuff like this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really cool. And so when you were growing up, first of all, where did you grow up, just for our audience's sake?
Oh, well, I was born around Santa Ana, around the Moreno Valley area, but we moved around a lot. That's where I would have started, but it would be at first we lived in Moreno Valley, then, the other places in the Riverside County, just
yeah.
all over the place.
Yeah, exactly. So and you're not alone. I've talked to a number of musicians that have had to stay mobile for early years, and it's definitely its own experience, especially when you're moving around a lot. But growing up, you had a lot of experience with music in a very professional, technical sense. Is that right? So when you were growing up, you also were being taught, learning, experiencing, recording, you were raised around music basically growing up. And I was hoping for our listeners, like, if you could share some of like, to what extent? Because I think that people kind of might have an idea, but I think that like there's certain hallmarks and milestones that you had, like opening for musical acts like Clay Aiken and performing at Carnegie Hall before the age of, I wanted to say 15. Am I right? And think it's, yeah. So, but like, what were you doing at the time? What were you playing that you could explain to people, like how, to what breadth, what scale you were, playing music and instruments?
Hmm. Are you talking about maybe specific instruments that I played or multiple genres that I've heard?
Yeah, I think maybe that's, yeah, it's a bit of a three-parter that I'm asking. So let me just ask really simply. So you played, can you tell people how many instruments you were playing as a kid?
It was mainly just the piano and, it was just piano and vocals growing up.
But you were able to do so to the point that you were like, you could like, do you have that tonal frequency recognition? Like you can like hear something and play it almost like right away. Yeah. So when you were 18 months old, it was, I think the theme from, I want to say, I don't remember which it was from. Can you help me out with what you were able to repeat it from?
I think it might have been Brady Bunch.
It was, okay. Damn it. I
Okay.
should have just gone with my first answer. So, I guess, when did you start composing music as opposed to playing musical pieces?
Oh my gosh. So my mom, she used to teach at this high school ages ago. And this guy who had like his own solo act, his name is Leonard. He was the keyboardist for Tori Kelly a couple of years ago. But way back when, he had his own solo act where he was able to put all these instruments together on his keyboard. And I remember being just so mind blown that that was even a thing, to just put all
Nice.
these instruments together and make a whole song out of it. So, my mom set it up for where he taught me how to do that. And then just from that moment on, I started just, my ability, so to speak, to make up songs started just expanding from there. It didn't matter the genre, but I was just able to pull what was from my head a lot easier when I was able to put all the instrumentations together on a MIDI keyboard.
So cool. And again, how old were you at the time?
At that time, I was probably around the same age, maybe a couple years younger. I think maybe 13, 14, somewhere around there.
So like it's all kind of coming together, coalescing into like discovery of like your favorite genre on the
Mhm.
horizon. But in the interim, you have this like almost like the doors fly right off the hinges in terms of like what musical expression can be for you.
Mhm.
That's so cool that you have this moment and then you just go for it completely at that point, right? I mean, you started composing, producing. I believe you play multiple instruments now as a result. Yes?
Y yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say that I'm, like, a professional at the guitar yet, or at least not to my satisfaction. As an artist, you're never fully satisfied.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, but still my main instruments are still at the piano and my own vocals, but I would love to learn how to play, like, the harp or violin someday. I think that'd be pretty cool.
Amazing. Well, I was going to point out that you do compose, produce, and play multiple instruments, and you handle the orchestral arrangements yourself. So I was going to ask, like, what part of that workload do you feel is the hardest to make or work with?
Like, in terms of symphonic metal in itself?
Yeah, for your
Yeah, so, the easier part, I'll start there with what's easier, is the orchestral parts because, I grew up with, like, one of the genres I grew up with was choral and orchestral music. I know what, bad ones sound like and how much range it's supposed to have. So when I'm able to either widen or minimize the sound when I transfer the MIDI data of everything I've made on my keyboard to a DAW I'm using, oh, excuse me. I'm able to just expand on that sound and use the updated sounds on like Ableton or something, and it can just go from there and be as big as I need it to be and as wide and as clear as I need the sound to be. But then you have the guitars, the bass, and the drum. When I'm doing that all on a MIDI keyboard, all on its own, it's very hard to find the right guitars, especially with what I know it's supposed to sound like versus what's available to me now. But yeah, because I don't want the orchestra to just be this really epic sound while the guitar is just like, I'm here too. And the bass and the drums are just like, all right, yeah. So
So I do, yeah, that's funny. Yeah, that's true. Having to like balance, I guess I'm always a big believer, and I keep on banging on about this, how like mixing is like one of the most undersung but insanely important things that you can do in music. You can master a shit mix and it's still going to sound really bad. So yeah, I think that you're into it. Yeah, what you said is 100% right, where it's like you got to find enough presence for this other instrument that doesn't normally, you'd think it, and it has so seamlessly in the past. Like you think of how many different symphonic metal acts have successfully incorporated. I don't know, it feels like a prerequisite that every Scandinavian who can play metal can also like somehow sandwich it with guitar nice seamlessly. Don't know. I don't know what it is. Don't know. I wanted to ask, how do you manage the tension between wanting total creative control? Because it sounds like you have this, like, just the mountains to deal with, to like do at your own disposal. But then how do you manage that between that and wanting outside collaboration?
So it depends on who I'm collaborating with. I'm not saying that they have to just agree with every single thing that I want, you know, because when you're working with other artists, they've had their own thing too. And then they say they want to work with you. And then you're like, oh, I'm liking what I'm hearing. I think we'll be able to click. And then just in my experience, for the most part, we've been able to. Any like disagreements or any things like, oh, that's fine, but I have this idea or I have that idea, yes or no. It wouldn't be like deal breaking, like, no, this is mine, or kind of thing. It would be more like I said, just open to what their creative, what's the word I'm looking for? Outlet or idea, any
Taste, maybe?
taste. Yes. Yeah. Just what their taste might be and how it will be able to not only blend with what I've already created,
Right.
but how it enhances the song, how it brings out certain parts of the lyrics, if there are lyrics to the song. And just like I think there's a certain voice behind every single song. And when you're working with other people, it's like, this is how I understand it to be, just from their point of view. And this is how I came to want to work with Kelsey. Or on my end, if I want to work with someone, I'm like, oh, I have all these ideas, or I have these ideas and want to introduce them to you and see if it would click. Why or why not? So, long story short, openness is kind of the main connecting piece, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that does actually. You're trying to stay receptive to what other people are bringing to the table. It's a tough thing. It's not easy, but that's why you have your solo projects and outlets. And then why, when you do finally go for collaboration, it's like you said, staying open to and receptive to their ideas as well. I think pivoting a little bit here, I think of symphonic metal as being quite niche and expensive to produce. And honestly, I think algorithmically pretty invisible. What has it taught you about ambition in a landscape that doesn't always reward it?
Not to sound exaggerating or anything, but being autistic and just being an autistic woman who likes metal and just all these other things that I guess kind of stand out in an invisible way, if that makes sense. I've grown up around that kind of thing. That's why symphonic metal in and of itself has spoken to me. So I guess what I've learned from that is, not only am I just clicking with this genre that's just so important to me in regards to how it helps me to grow as an artist and as a person and how it inspires me overall. But, when you're ambitious about something that may be kind of like invisible to other people or just barely there, and you're just like, but wait, hold on a second, this is really cool. It's hard, it's hard to balance that when you're met with, you could do this or you could do that, but you got something that's just right there for you. And, when it's your heart, the hard spots kind of become worth it. It makes the ambition a bit easier carry.
Well said. I think when I hear your music, it carries like an almost like a cinematic, almost like a narrative scale to it. When you write, do you see like scenes, worlds, characters, or is it something more abstract?
I want to say both because there would be times I could just be on a walk somewhere, or I'm in one of my classes in grad school, or when I went to UNLV getting my bachelor's degree, I would be in a class or on my way to the cafeteria. It could just be simplistic moments or really serene moments or very big moments where I am just not necessarily, quote, thinking, unquote, of writing a song, but it would just come to me naturally. And depending on whether I'm like, this could be something, or all right, I'll just jot this down. Maybe it'll mean something later. It just flows naturally that way, and I expand from there. Like with Boundless, I'm just in my studio slash bonus room in a house that I used to live in, and from there I have this view where I can see these mountains and all these other houses and whatnot. The sunset was pink and orange, and these clouds were just perfectly covering the tops of the mountain. And suddenly, just my brain is just capturing everything. And it's like I can hear the music in that view. And I'm hearing na 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 na. And then it's just going on and on. And I'm just, I kid you not, I ran to my keyboard and just started going all at it.
Amazing. It's you when inspiration hits you, you want to be ready, right? I love that you knew right away and you captured it. That's such a like classic example of inspiration hitting. And it's also so much more infrequent now. I almost hear like, I mean, I guess it's a little less. I do hear people getting inspiration, obviously, still. That's clearly a thing. It's going to happen. But I think the way you're describing it, the way that you see this like scene and it has this impact on you. And right away, the first thing you think is like, I have to capture this. I have to put this in a bottle. You know what I mean? Like I gotta like give this its fair due almost. I think for me, how much of the work is you just showing up without those moments of inspiration? Because I think personally speaking, I'm now at a place where I've got enough inspiration over time that I've kind of like captured. And now I have a pretty large amount of ideas that I'm very fortunate to have, sort of organized a bit. But for people that are more starting out and they feel like you're supposed to only have those moments, how much of that of your process is actually moments of, inspiration versus you just showing up every day, putting the work in and doing what you need to do? How much of it is like inspiration versus showing up?
I've never really thought of it as a versus. It's like I said, when I played the piano at 18 months old, there was the technical aspect of this is what that note sounds like for that melody, but I'm not thinking of it in those words. I'm thinking, oh, there's a note. Oh, I'm gonna play it. What if I don't know if I mentioned this, but apparently at that age, I also ended up doing different variations of that song from what I heard on the TV.
Wow.
So
So yeah.
it's just kind of been built into me. If I'm showing up and let's say I don't know, working with or collaborating with some big band, or I'm opening for them, or, just doing something, some big project that I'm being paid a lot of money to do. It's like, you give me the concept, I got it. And then I just expand on that. It's just something I don't know how to say. It's just something I've been able to do, whether I'm just showing up or it's this big moment of an aha thing where I'm like, wow, look at this view or look at this specific thing. I've got to write something for it,
It is, you're fortunate in that that is like a channel that you can access readily and you can do it in such a way that it is very much like you can just switch it on almost. Is that fair to say?
Yeah.
Okay. And that's fascinating to me. Like, I think it's something that it's so easy for people to sort of like, it's so easy for some people to say, well, I wish I could just know things so naturally. And what would you say to a person that thinks something like that, where they're like, oh, well, I wish I could have just that ability to do whatever? Is it as simple as like you just wave a wand and suddenly there's music, or is there a little bit more to it?
Well, that's kind of how I've been, I've been told, oh, you have this big gift, oh, or it's so magical for you. And I'm like, it just feels natural to me. So I guess maybe if I'm phrasing it right, just like maybe I would say, don't try and force anything, nothing authentic or good or inspirational or freeing ever comes out of anything that's forced. So, acknowledge the insecurities that you feel, the insecurities that you think, let it just flow out of you. Because, I have those moments myself, no matter how naturally it comes to me. I'll have these moments where I think, for the most part, maybe it's necessary if you're an artist that wants to keep thriving in the world of the entertainment music industry, where it's like, oh, this is probably going to suck. Oh, I wish this would just come right at me, but ultimately, I think it's those vulnerable moments that kind of break you and have it come out of you in an unexpected moment. You know what I mean?
I do. I really do. It's interesting. Like you mentioned the industry, and I mean, music, I think famously is like just a brutal industry for all of its participants. I think I wanted to ask, what's the hardest myth you've had to unlearn about the music industry as someone who's doing everything solo?
Well, that's just it. I'm doing everything solo, and I think the biggest myth, so to speak, was that I would see people doing something similar to what I look forward to doing professionally one day, and receiving a paycheck for what I love to do. And it's like, oh, when I was 15 or when I was 20, I got signed to a label, and I'm just that's the biggest myth I've had to overcome, that it's going to happen when you're super young. And I mean, not to say I'm like too old or anything, or that's just been the biggest myth I've had to overcome, was that it's going to happen right away, right when you've discovered that's exactly what you want. That's another thing I learned about when I was in university. You got to have a thorough plan depending on, how far in you want to go. You got to make a That's why I'm kind of a big advocate for going to school or going to university. I know it's not for everyone, but for anyone considering it, I think going to school for whatever music career you want to have, whether it's music academia or music industry, you got to make a plan for yourself on how you're going to go about it. What labels, what agencies, what kind of mixing and mastering engineer can you click with the budget that you have. You gotta maybe get a side job, doing what you don't maybe want to do right at that moment, so you can fund your career goals. And that's what I had to learn for myself. That was my myth to kind of overcome, was that it was just going to happen like right away and someone was just going to magically discover me or something like that. But half the time it's probably not going to be your story. I think maybe sometimes your story is going to be, you got to work your way from the bottom up to get there. And, sometimes it's not going to be that smooth of a transition in terms of in terms of how it happens. I'm not saying everybody who's had it happen right away has it easy, but just, I think that's probably a myth that I had to overcome, was that it's just gonna happen as work for it and continue to nurture the talent that you already have inside of you.
Yeah. Yeah. I've actually had that as well in the past. And it's funny, I feel like the best thing to dispel that myth for me personally has been just the passage of time, where I was a very precocious and, I thought I would make it in whatever field. And I was like destined to make it. And then as soon as every year that passes without you getting discovered or whatever, it's like, you gotta like actually put the work in. You need to put the work in. And there are some people that do make those connections, and bully for them. I'm not one of those people, clearly. So it's interesting knowing that, like, I mean, knowing that you've mentioned being autistic, right? So I would ask, like, knowing that you are not the type of person that is going to be the mainstream, the same type of mind that operates the same as everyone else. In what ways has the industry misread or misunderstood you, is my question.
It's kind of hard to put into words because, like I said, growing up, I would say something that would logically make sense in my own head in some certain social aspects, and it would have me misreading somebody's intent to do harm to me as somebody who wants to be my friend because they are masking or, masquerading as such. But, someone who's pretending to be one thing when they mean another, or if you say one thing, they take it offensively and it's like, oh, so you're really saying this, that, and that. So you're really this and that. And, just,
Yikes,
and,
yeah.
in general, that's just kind of been a thing that I had to navigate around, because it would end up with me being, bullied. I mean, sometimes I would when I was a lot younger, like in third grade in elementary school, there was a time where I misread someone's intent to be my friend, to the point where I was, locked in a bathroom. And as soon as I was let out, they were laughing at me. And, that's still something I've carried to this day. And, in community college, it was it was having to get used to same intent, different faces. And it got harder to read as you grow up. And, when so in the music industry, it's just kind of navigating who means what. And it took a lot of doing and a lot of self work, but I'm able to see that a little clearer than I was before while staying true to how my own mind still works and will always work for the rest of my life. I would say, I guess, in a general sense, that most artists who are not of your typical neurological blueprint, they're not going to approach agencies with the same level of social quickness that a lot of neurotypical artists might. So I think that's one
Well,
thing that a lot of the gatekeepers in the music industry could better see, if that makes sense.
it does, yeah. I mean, the sad part of it is that it's the tragic part of it for me is when you're saying having a harder time reading and understanding the intention of someone. It's devastating to hear because that's precisely the type of thing that music is really lousy for. Is there's so many people that are just going to say, they're just going to tell you whatever you want to hear, and they'll say whatever they can in order to get that name on the dotted line. And then from there, they own everything. They own it all. I mean, you've got but then there's also other record labels and agencies and that are actually trying to kind of do the right thing. And it's really hard to parse out who's doing what and for what reason and whether it's actually of decent intent. I myself have a hard time seeing through that stuff, being, I suppose neurotypical is the way we might put it. So I struggle with that. So good luck to anyone who's neurodivergent as well, trying to parse out specifically and accurately every time. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that you're actually in good company when it comes to the music industry, because we're all very confused as to why everybody is predatory and just got their hands in everybody's pocket. I don't understand it. I just don't. But the world's mad with it. But there are always the people that are going to exist who are going to try and move things in the right direction. And as long as there are artists like yourself who are talented, have something to say, and continue doing so, I strongly believe that there will always be people that will be there to help effectively promote and raise them up in ways that are actually decent. Yes, you're going to have your vultures. Got it. 100%. The way that it's been going for so long, where it's hey, we're going to scrape all your data and everything you've ever written, and we're just going to train our own large language model off of that. You cool with that? Too late. You already said yes through some sort of loophole. That's the kind of predatory I'm talking about, where it's a systems level. It's not just individuals per se. I'm talking it's that insidious, boring superstructure of we've built this headless blunder that's going to go do our whim, and that's going to exploit all your stuff. But it's not me. I didn't do it. I mean, that's the thing. So all that is to say is that I really feel for you, because I also feel that way, that in that sense, in this industry, I think working with people is the thing that gets us outside of that feeling. And I was going to ask you, in terms of trying to make decent segues, hopefully this works, in the spirit of collaboration, when you were working with Bjorn Hofer on In the Shadow, is it fair to say that you put your voice in a very different sonic environment? Is that a fair assessment?
Sonic environment?
It's a pretty cheesy way of putting that. Maybe I'll say you were using it in a very different way. Is that fair to say? Or do you feel that was par for the course?
I guess you could say the former of what you said. I'm not entirely sure how to explain that, but no, I will say that when I did my vocals and just wrote the words to everything that he composed, I'm so how am I going to, because for that project in and of itself, I heard words first, and then or not heard words first, but lyrics came first. And then I'm all right, how am I going to sing it? If I'm going to sing it this way, how am I going to condense the words and the impact of those words to bring out what I hear in the composition? And is that basically matching what Bjorn is looking for? And, can I still express myself through those songs? And, the answer was yes to all of that. It was pretty interesting experience with all of that overall.
Amazing. I wanted to take a minute to help plug what you've recently released. So you've got Rage coming out. By the time this comes out, it'll already likely have been released. Can you tell us more about that particular single and what that's marking for you in the near future?
So just all about that one song, Rage. That actually has come from multiple inspirations, but the main one as of recent And by recent, I mean like, I don't know, maybe a year ago. I'm reading this chapter of this webtoon that I really liked called Lore Olympus. There was a chapter that really struck me where it said that anger and being enraged served a purpose that was just beyond discord. When managed well and taken care of by the person feeling that level of anger and rage, when you accept that that's how it is and you take care of it, it becomes a necessity, almost cathartic, actually exactly cathartic. So, something happens in that chapter where it's released and it's unfiltered. It's brutal, but it turned out to be just this necessary thing that needed to just happen. And, it was just, to me, it was just beautifully beautiful. And I had never seen anger or rage tackled that way. It seemed like something like, it doesn't solve your problems. So don't get mad. And, just filter it and swallow those uncomfortable feelings. And I'm like, no. So when I wrote Rage, I wanted to write it for people who, like myself, like who were in situations where they were exactly right to have those angry feelings of rage. They were victims of bullying or anything that where you would call, if you were to call it bullying, it would be an understatement, if you know what I mean. Just intense experiences where so many around you are just telling you to get over it or to quote calm down or something where they want you to water your feelings because what you've been through to make you have those feelings of rage don't necessarily reach them the same way, or it just makes them uncomfortable to hear about it. So when I wrote the lyrics, when I wrote the song the way I wrote it, I even did some growling and learned how to, learn how to do that specifically for that song. And then it just became kind of an ability where I'm like, oh, cool, I'm able to do that. So, I wanted to put that in the beginning and the end of the song just to show, just how much that kind of a message means to me, especially as someone neurodivergent, where I'm being told by people who couldn't really understand how I feel or what I went through, or wanting me to swallow myself whole or swallow my feelings or just make others uncomfortable by masking. So I don't know if that answers the questions of, how Rage came to be. Yeah, that's pretty much how the inspiration came to be for Rage.
That did beautifully. And also, kudos on the growling, by the way. There are a lot of vocalists out there. Don't think many of them would be able to sort of just pick up that skill. I don't think there's many people that would just be able to pick up that skill just like that. So that's good. I was impressed. We're coming up towards the end, and I wanted to give you a chance to kind of plug your next, what your near future is looking like in terms of just how Rage fits into the future of your releases. And I'm wondering if you want to talk about your upcoming projects at all.
So Rebirth is the album or the project that I'm currently working on, and how Rage fits into that. It's the middle part of the whole thing. So you got my first 4 songs that are kind of like the beginning of everything, where it's like, how do I put it? It's kind of like a build up, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. Yeah, I was going to say building.
Yeah, it's
building up to it, yeah.
So I've got that, and then Rage is just the catharsis, so to speak, and then the other songs that come after is the post catharsis feelings that you would get. The weight is lifted off. So I just wanted to write about how I've experienced that kind of a journey.
Really interesting, because when sometimes by blocking it, you're not really engaging with that feeling. But yet by letting it come to pass and you really, really fully, truly letting yourself experience it to the fullest extent in a way that's obviously, both passionate, but also artful, creative, creative completely in a creative sense, you're still allowing yourself that passage from one to the other. By the way, I was going to say that downward trend after the climax. There's a fancy French word for it, the denouement, as it were. So you can keep that one with. That's one that writers use. But yeah, it's a fantastic. I'm very fortunate to have been able to listen to all of this, and I'm very excited for anyone who's going to listen, because I am not a symphonic metal guy, and I enjoyed the hell out of your album, and I'm very, very much looking forward to people starting to really recognize what you've got going on, which is really special. And not just because of you, but because of what you're creating, which is like, I think that's the part that always matters most. I'm sorry, but like, I think that, yes, people can be like, you separate the art from the artist, but like, God damn, is that art really important to me? And I'm really digging what you're making. So I wanted to thank you so much for coming on to the podcast and just sharing with us your experiences and your creative process and like how you got to where you're at. And I want to wish you luck with what you got coming out next. Okay.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. It's
My
been
pleasure.
unreal.
Amazing. Where would you want people to follow you or speak, or if you want potential fans to like engage with you?
I would say Instagram or YouTube is just my main thing. Maybe SoundCloud. Admittedly, I'm not the biggest social person in the world, but I do have my main sources of, connection. If fans want to, reach out to me or people want to become fans of me, those are my main sources of where you can connect with me.
Cool. And what's your handle on Instagram?
It's Kelsey_music 2024.
Nice. Can I ask why the 2024 out of curiosity?
Well, that's a bit of a personal thing, but that specific year just was a big turning point for me. Just that's all I can say on that until I feel like changing it.
Interesting. Okay. I'll let you keep that one. I'm not going to quiz you about that one, but needless to say, with an album called Rebirth and a single like Rage, I can imagine that it was a tumultuous year. But I'm so glad to see you doing well on the other end of it and making what you are. So thank you. And again, you heard it here, Kelsey_music 2024. And give her a follow and check it out today. Same name on Spotify or any other DSP. Is it Kelsey or Kelsey Dower? Which is it?
Well, I mean, you could do Kelsey Dower, but it's usually just my first name that I'm just cool
Sweet.
with. Yeah.
Right on. Okay. Well, thank you very much. And thank you so much for coming on the show.
Mhm.